Thank you. Thank you. After those remarks by Senator Turner and the field of burn, it feels very warm in this room, I'll tell you that. Well, I want to thank Senator Nina Turner not only for her support in this campaign, but for her years of work on behalf of working people, her fight for racial and social justice. And I want to thank Rachel Sellis and Mr. Sons Echo and Michelle Mahon and Kurt Hess and Gerald Goins and Humble G and the Reverend C.J. Harkness, all for participating in this event. And mostly on a beautiful morning. That was a joke, it's not a beautiful morning. I want to thank all of you for coming on out to discuss some very serious issues. You know, as Senator Turner indicated, what this campaign is about is taking a hard look at where we are and where we want to go. And one of the differences, I think, in this campaign between my opponents and me is I believe that our nation, when we stand together, when we don't allow the Donald Trumps and others of this world to divide us up, I believe that there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. So this campaign is about understanding that we today are the wealthiest country in the history of the world. But most people don't know that. And they don't know that because they're too busy working 50 or 60 hours a week to know that almost all of the new wealth and income being created is going to the top 1%. So what this campaign is about is not only asking people to envisage a new America, but also to understand that no president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can do it alone. And this is what Senator Turner was talking about. Every person in this room is enormously powerful if you choose to use your power. And every person in this room is enormously powerless if you choose not to use that power. So here is the issue. Here is the issue. The issue is that when millions of people come together and they stand up and they say, you know what? In America, men and women have fought and died. And as the former chairman of the Senate Veterans Committee, I've had the opportunity to meet with some great heroes and heroines. And you know what they did? They put their lives on the line from World War II on up to defend American democracy. Now, we take democracy kind of for granted. But the truth is, democracy is a very, very radical idea. And what that means is that in the course of world history, almost always you had a king or a queen or a czar. Those guys made the decisions. You're going off to war. I said you're going off to war. You're paying taxes. I'm taking your land. I made that decision. It doesn't matter what you think or what happens to your life. What democracy is about is saying that all of us together have the right to determine the future of this country. But in the last election in November 2014, 63% of the American people didn't vote. 80% of young people didn't vote. And what happens when ordinary people, working people, low-income people, middle-class people, young people, don't vote, that political vacuum is filled by wealthy campaign contributors and lobbyists who say, hey, this is great. Young people aren't voting. That is fantastic. We can now make the decisions for this country. Older people are not voting. That's great. Because the world changes when you have a handful of billionaires making the decisions as opposed to ordinary Americans making the decisions. So what this campaign is about is calling for a political revolution. And what that means is no president, not Bernie Sanders, not anybody else can do it alone. Why is that? And I'll tell you why. And this is a truth that many politicians will not tell you. The truth is that Wall Street, corporate America, the corporate media, large campaign donors have so much influence over the political and economic system of our country today that no president, not the best intentioned in the world, can take them on. The only way we take them on is when millions of people, black and white and Latino and Native Americans and Asian Americans, gay and straight, men and women, when people stand up and when they demand something which is not really terribly radical, when they demand that the United States government starts representing ordinary Americans rather than wealthy campaign contributors. When that happens, we transform America. That's what this campaign is about. Now, over the last 9.5 months since we began this campaign, a lot has changed. When I began the campaign, what the pundits were saying, well, they say, Bernie, you comb your hair really great. You wear your GQ outfit here. You have all the requirements to be the president. But two things. Number one, to run for president in this day and age, you need a huge, and I say huge, amount of money. Just need hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more than that. We made a decision early on, a very important decision, which distinguishes my campaign from my opponent's campaign. And what we said is, we do not represent the billionaire class. We do not represent corporate America. We do not represent Wall Street. We do not want their money. We are not going to have a super PAC. Well, that's a great speech to give, but then the next question is, how do you raise the money you need to run a winning campaign? Thank you very much. The answer is grassroots. That's right. So we did something that is unprecedented in politics today. What we said is, look, we're not going to go to billionaires' homes and raise millions of dollars. We're going to ask middle class and working families of this country for their help. And you know what's happened in the last 9 months? We have received over 4 million individual contributions. And that is more than any candidate in the history of this country up to this point in election. And do you know what the average campaign contribution is? It's a great university, very smart people. 27 bucks. And all of the political geniuses out there, they're figuring out, they say, how could it be? How can you actually run a winning campaign with an average contribution of $27? But I think what people are saying is not only are they supportive of what we're fighting for, but they're saying something else. They're saying we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that billionaires do not buy elections in the United States of America. And I'll tell you what else has been going on. When we began the campaign, we were at 3% in the polls. Very few people outside of my own state of Vermont actually knew who I was, let alone what we were fighting for. We have come a long way in the last 9 months. In the last week or so, there were 3 national polls that actually had us in the lead. And when you do some of these polls, which has Bernie Sanders against Trump or Hillary Clinton against Trump, almost all of those polls have us beating Trump by wider margins. Now, Ohio, as you all know, is one of the important political states in this country. You're having a primary here on March 15th. With your help, we can win this primary and help us go forward to victory. Now, I think the reason that we have come so far and are doing so well is pretty simple. We're doing something very, very radical. We're telling the American people the truth. Now, I know that that is a radical idea, but hey, and that is what we are saying is, look, before this country, before any country can go forward, you got to really look honestly at the problems and the realities, even if they are unpleasant realities. You know, unless you look at what goes on, you don't have a foundation in which to go forward. And what we have been doing in this campaign is listening to ordinary people, not just big money contributors. We are listening to millions of workers in this country who are telling us they cannot make it on $9 or $10 an hour. And I have been proud to be out on picket lines with fast food workers who are saying just that, saying, you know, we have families to raise, we can't do it on $10 an hour, we need decent health care. And I have been proud to stand with them in the fight for $15 an hour and the right to organize a union. So when we talk about America and we understand the massive levels of income and wealth inequality, where the top one-tenth of 1% now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%, in America, we can create an economy where if you work 40 hours a week, you are not living in poverty. And in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we should not be having millions of senior citizens and disabled veterans trying to scrape by on $11,000 or $12,000 a year Social Security. And I just want you for a moment, put yourself in the place of that 80, 90-year-old person. Healthcare needs, prescription drug needs, got to keep your home warm in the wintertime. Go home and do the arithmetic and see what happens when you receive $11,000 or $12,000 a year. A country, a great country, is judged not by how many millionaires and billionaires it has, but on how it treats the weakest and most vulnerable amongst us. That is what a great nation is about, and that is what every religion in the world, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, that's what they tell us. What they tell us is that morally we cannot be human beings if we turn our backs on people sleeping out on the streets or children who are hungry. And what being human is about is, I've got 4 great kids and 7 beautiful grandchildren. I want you to worry and be concerned about my kids and my grandchildren, and I will worry about you and your kids and your parents. That's a society. And as I go around the country, and I talk to young people, what they are saying is, why is it that we are leaving college $50,000, $100,000 in debt? Why is it we are being punished for what crime? The crime of trying to get a good education? We shouldn't be punished for that. So what this campaign is about is asking everybody in America, think outside of the box. Just think for a second. Everybody here knows that if our country is to do well now and in the future, we need the best educated workforce in the world, right? Everybody knows that. We want to encourage people to get a higher education. We want to make it easier for those people who are not going to college to learn how to become plumbers and carpenters and sheet metal workers. A lot of good jobs out there. We should not be punishing people. We should be rewarding people who want to get an education. This is not a radical concept. It is what other countries are already doing. You go to Germany, college education is free. I was at a meeting in Washington last year, and I was giving a speech, and I said, well, in Scandinavia, by and large, college education is free. And some guy jumped up and said, no, Senator, you're wrong. I'm from Finland, you're wrong. It's not free. They actually pay us to go to college. Well, but here's the point. Thinking outside of the box. If we want a strong economy, I want to encourage people to get all the education they need without having to pay off student debt for the next 30 years. And when we talk about listening to people, this campaign is listening to women. And women are asking us, why is it that we make 79 cents on the dollar compared to men? Why is that? And if we are African American women, the discrepancy is even wider. And that is why I know that every man in this room will stand with the women in the fight for pay equity. Every psychologist who studies the issue tells us that the most formative years, the most important years of a human being's life are 0 to 4. That's when we develop emotionally and intellectually. And all over this country, moms and dads, they come up and they say, how does it happen that when those 4 years are so important and we have to go out to work, mom is working, dad is working, why can't we find high quality, affordable childcare? As a country, we should have a world-class pre-K childcare system, and together we're going to develop that system. And to those of you who are in school right now, young men, young women, I hope that you will give some thought to going into childcare, to fighting to make sure that childcare workers have a career they're proud of, they earn good wages and good benefits for doing some of the most important work in America. And when we listen to people, we are listening to our brothers and sisters in the African American community. And they are asking us, why is it that we see on television unarmed African Americans being shot by police officers? Now, I was a mayor of the city of Burlington, Vermont. Anybody here from Vermont? All right, a few. We're a small state, all right. And I was mayor of the largest city there for 8 years, and I worked closely with the police. And the vast, overwhelming majority of police officers are hardworking people, honest people trying to do a very, very difficult job. That's right. And by the way, when we talk about young people thinking about careers, we need some great police officers out there. Think about law enforcement. But, and here is the but, like any other public official, if a police officer breaks the law, that officer must be held accountable. I have talked to people in the African American community, people with PhDs, who say, you know, if I'm driving across the country, I get kind of nervous. And the reason for that is that African Americans are stopped a lot more for traffic issues than are whites. We have got to take on this issue of institutional racism and a broken criminal justice system. That is why I believe, and again I speak as a former mayor, that we have to demilitarize local police departments. Some of these local police departments look like occupying armies. What the function of a good police department is about is to be part of the community, to be trusted by the community, not to be seen as an oppressive force in the community. And we need to make police departments look like the diversity of the communities they are serving. We also need to take a whole lot of looks at criminal justice in general. For example, we need to rethink the so-called war on drugs. Over the last 30 years, millions of Americans have received police records for possession of marijuana. Right now, under the Federal Controlled Substance Act, marijuana is listed as a Schedule I drug alongside of heroin. Now, I trust that everybody in this room knows, and sometimes people don't know, because this is a real problem in my state, in New Hampshire, and around this country. Heroin is a killer drug. Stay away from it. Now, there are people and scientists who argue the pluses and the minuses of marijuana, but no sensible person believes that marijuana is anything like heroin. And that's why I believe. Now, that is why I believe we should take marijuana out of the Federal Controlled Substance Act. States have the right, and the people in the states have a right to legalize marijuana or not. That's a state decision. But from the federal perspective, possession of marijuana should not be a crime. And when we talk about criminal justice, let me make some connections here. It's not only that we are dealing with institutional racism, it's we are dealing with a situation where youth unemployment in this country is off the charts. No one talks about it very much, but here's the facts. If a kid is 17 to 20 years of age, graduated high school, and is white, that kid is 33% of those white kids are unemployed or underemployed. If that kid is Latino, the number is 36%. If that kid is African American, that number is 51% unemployed or underemployed. So are you ready for a radical idea? Together, we have got to invest in education and jobs, not jails and incarceration. We are spending $80 billion a year to lock up 2.2 million Americans. In my view, it makes a lot more sense to send a young person to the University of Ohio than lock him up. It's a lot cheaper. And when we talk about criminal justice, I'll tell you a story. We did a meeting on this, actually. Senator Turner was there with me. We did it in Iowa a couple of months ago. We had a couple of guys there, remarkable men, who had served prison time. And one guy said, you know, I was in jail, and then on one day somebody said to me, oh, by the way, you're going to be released tomorrow, and here's $75, lots of luck. He ended up back in jail. We need to understand that if we want to cut the rates of recidivism, we need to make sure that people have the education and the jobs they need to find a good life in civil society. Now, my dad came to this country at the age of 17 from Poland without a nickel in his pocket. He never made much money. Dropped out of high school. My mom graduated high school. So I am a little bit sensitive to the issue of immigration. And I want everybody here to know that in America today, we have 11 million people come to this country to try to get a little bit better life for themselves and their children. And what we're seeing now is a horrendous level of bigotry and racism in attacking these people. When you have people like Trump saying that Mexicans are rapists or criminals, that is an outrage which we will not accept. We need comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship for the undocumented. Now, I think the reason that our campaign is doing well is that we are touching a nerve in America, and people are responding very strongly. Vast majority of the American people, you could be conservative, progressive, moderate, Democrat, Republican, whatever. Very few people think that it is right that the 20 wealthiest people in this country now own more wealth than the bottom 150 million Americans, half of our people. And when I talk about a rigged economy, I am talking about the fact that one family in this country, the Walton family who owns Walmart, owns more wealth than the bottom 40% of the American people. Does that sound like what America is supposed to be about? And let me tell you something about what a rigged economy means. What a rigged economy means is that the wealthiest family in America, the Walton family, pays wages at Walmart that are so low that many of their employees have to be on Medicaid food stamps and subsidized housing. And you know who pays for that Medicaid food stamps? You do. So on behalf of the wealthiest family in the world, in the United States, worth some $60 billion or so, I want to thank you. They are very appreciative that you are helping to subsidize their company. That was a joke. In fact, of course, it's an outrage. Why should the middle class of this country have to subsidize employees who work for the wealthiest family in America? That's pretty crazy stuff. So I say to the Walton family, get off of welfare, start paying your workers a living wage. Now, when we talk about politics in America, you got a lot of Republicans running around the country talking about family values. They love families. You all know what they mean by family values. What they mean is that no woman in this room, in this state, in this country should have the right to control her own body. I disagree. What they mean is that our gay brothers and sisters should not have the right to get married. I disagree. Now, I know I will not shock anybody when I suggest to you that on occasion there is a bit of hypocrisy in politics. I know you're all shocked to hear that. But in this issue, I think the hypocrisy reaches an all-time high, and this is why. You got Republicans running around this country, and they say, government stinks, government's the source of all evil, we hate government, we're going to cut Social Security, we're going to cut Medicare and Medicaid and the Postal Service because we hate government. But when it comes to a very personal choice that a woman may have to make, they love the government and want the government to make that choice for that woman. That, my friends, is called hypocrisy. When we talk about the need to rebuild the middle class, we are talking about a massive federal jobs programs to put our people back to work. We should be hiring teachers, not firing teachers. Tonight, if my memory is correct, I'm heading to Flint, Michigan. And it's not a meeting that I look forward to because I know what I'm going to hear because I've already spoken to people in Flint. And I spoke quietly to a number of people, and what they told me literally is incomprehensible, that we are seeing what we are seeing in the United States of America in 2016. Thousands of children being poisoned by a broken water system, a poisonous water system. Now, my point is, Flint is maybe the worst example of a collapsing infrastructure, but it is not the only example. We can create millions of good-paying jobs by rebuilding our water systems, our wastewater plants, our roads, our bridges, our airports, our rail systems. The other thing that we have got to do is not only create jobs, because real unemployment in America is close to 10%, not 5%. The other thing we have to do is prevent the continued loss of millions of jobs because of our disastrous trade policies. One of the differences between Secretary Clinton and myself is that she supported NAFTA, she supported permanent normal trade relations with China. I helped lead the opposition to those trade agreements. I was right, she was wrong. Look, you don't need, I suppose we have some PhDs in economics here, but you don't need one to understand what these trade policies are about. It's not complicated. You have a large corporation, and right now you're paying a worker in the United States 15, 20, 25 bucks an hour. You got to provide health care. You got to protect environmental legislation and regulations. Why would you want to do that when you could shut down in America, move abroad, pay people pennies an hour, not worry about unions, not worry about the environment, and bring your product back into America? That's what these trade agreements are, nothing more complicated than that. Since 2001, we've lost 60,000 factories in America, a lot of that having to do with disastrous trade agreements. If elected president, we will fundamentally rewrite trade agreements in this country. Corporate America, every night, turn on the TV, they say, buy this product, buy that product. Well, if they want us to buy these products, maybe they better start manufacturing those products in Ohio and America. All of you are aware that as a result of the greed, recklessness, and illegal behavior, Wall Street drove this country into the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. That's a fact. We bailed out Wall Street against my vote, but Congress bailed out Wall Street because the big banks were too big to fail, i.e., if they went under, they'd take half of the economy with them. Turns out that today, 3 out of the 4 largest banks are much bigger than they were when we bailed them out because they were too big to fail. Turns out that the 6 largest banks in America issue 2/3 of the credit cards that you have and write 1/3 of the mortgages. In my view, if Teddy Roosevelt, the great trust buster, were alive today, what he would say when you have that much concentration of economic and political power, what you have got to do is break them up, and I agree. People often ask me, what, Bernie, is the most important issue? And I can't give you one issue because they're all important, but this I will tell you. There is one issue that impacts all other issues, and that is a corrupt campaign finance system which is undermining American democracy. The Koch brothers, Wall Street, billionaires should not be able to buy elections in the United States of America. Together, we are going to overturn Citizens United. As I said earlier, if this country is to do well economically, we need to have the best educated workforce in the world. And what that means to me right now are 2 major things. Number one, as a nation, we have got to understand that in the year 2016, when we talk about public education, you're not just talking about 1st grade through 12th grade. You have got to understand that a college degree today is in many ways the equivalent of what a high school degree was 50 years ago. So we've got to do 2 things. Number one, anybody in this country, regardless of his or her income, I came from a family, didn't have a whole lot of money. Anybody in this country who is smart, does well in school, and is qualified should be able to go to a public college or university tuition free. And second of all, we have got to deal with this crisis of student debt. Anybody here with student debt? All right, we have legislation that will significantly reduce student debt by allowing those with the debt to refinance their loans and get the lowest possible interest rates they can find. I'm a member of the U.S. Senate Committee on the Environment and the Senate Committee on Energy. And let me be the first to tell you what I think you already know. Climate change is real. Climate change is caused by human activity, and it is already doing causing devastating problems in our country all over the world. We need to have the courage to stand up to the fossil fuel industry, transform our energy system. We cannot allow the fossil fuel industry to think that their short-term profits are more important than the kind of planet we're going to be leaving to our kids and future generations. Now, I've been criticized in this campaign for many, many things every day, and that's okay. There you go. I love you too. And here is one area that I have been criticized. Bernie, they say, why do you think the United States of America can do what every other major country on earth does? UK, France, Germany, Holland, Scandinavia, Canada. Why do you think that in America we can guarantee health care to all people as a right? Well, you know what? Let me be as clear as I can be. I believe that health care is a right, not a privilege. And I believe that when 29 million Americans today, despite the gains, the real good gains of the Affordable Care Act, but when 29 million Americans have zero health insurance, many of you are underinsured with large deductibles and copayments, and when we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs from a pharmaceutical industry which is ripping us off in unbelievable ways, you want to hear crazy? This is crazy. 1 in 5 Americans who receive a prescription from a doctor cannot afford to fill that prescription. That's crazy stuff. So we are going to take on the drug companies, we are going to take on the insurance companies, and we are going to pass a Medicare for all program. This campaign is not just about electing a president, although, of course, I'm here for that purpose and would appreciate your support on March 15th, but it is more than that. It is more than that. What this campaign is about is pushing forward for a political revolution which revitalizes American democracy, which demands that our government represents all of us and not just the 1%. There is nothing that I've talked to you about this morning that is radical, that is outside of the mainstream, that the American people do not want to see happen. They know that the rich are getting richer while everybody else is getting poorer. The issue is, do we have the courage to tell the billionaire class that they cannot have it all, that this country belongs to all of us, not just a few? And if we have that courage, we're going to win here on March 15th, and together we're going to transform America. Thank you.